Maybe we want to watch one of these videos here. Pally, the problem with Dead by Springtrap. It's the problem with the Springtrap problem, Dead by Daylight.
Although I do enjoy a wee bit of the
I don't think I
singularity
watched this
sometimes
guy,
if he
but this would be
wasn't
interesting.
bugged at the time of recording this. But then again, so is Trapper, along with 80% of the killer roster. What even is this patch? Anyway, today I want to talk about the upcoming Five Nights at Freddy's chapter in Dead by Daylight. But before I do that, I want to preface this by saying that unless I'm quoting an actual reliable source, everything I'm saying here is speculation and prediction. Now, let's be honest. Five Nights at Freddy's is the single most hyped chapter since the original Resident Evil chapter in 2021, even surpassing Resident Evil.
More hyped than Resident Evil. I don't know. I don't know if I believe that. Maybe.
Aside from maybe Jason Voorhees himself from Friday the 13th,
Jason Voorhees. #1 most requested killer out of all of the slasher characters out there. All of the different killers that could potentially be put in the game. I think Jason Voorhees top of the list. Mainly because they've got horror, the slasher Rushmore. Pretty much it's just Jason they're missing. The hockey mask. The hockey mask is not there and they need the hockey mask.
players Five Nights at Freddy's is going to bring to DBD is huge. It's projected to be a massive resurgence for the DBD player base if behavior can make it stick, if they can retain the players. However, that brings me to the first possible problem that could doom Springtrap to being one of the most hated killers in DBD, at least for a while. And I ain't talking about jump scares. Now I'll start off by saying this. If you were here for the release of Wesker, Project W, or even recently, the release of Kaneki, you know exactly what I'm about to say. Although I remember it being a lot more of a, quote, problem, if you even want to call it that, with Wesker. We're a month or so into Kaneki's release, and I don't really see him around anymore, but Wesker's pick rate, however, was the highest in the game for nearly 6 months. It takes a lot to surpass Huntress. With the amount of hype and the amount of new players that FNAF is projected to bring to the game, Springtrap is about to be in 90% of Survivor's games for months. Even the current DBD killer players, many of them are dropping their current main killers to main and play Springtrap. That's the first potential issue. He's gonna be everywhere. It's gonna be like that for months.
So, I agree with him. I think, you having to play against the same character repeatedly gets tiring. For me, I'm not a great Survivor player either, so I know it's going to be a stomp whenever I'm up against a relatively strong killer. They've nerfed Kaneki, thankfully. So Kaneki is... I can loop Kaneki a little bit. I looped a Kaneki for quite a while, probably a newer one, but I can loop Kaneki, so, it's not so bad seeing Kaneki once in a while. But yeah, I think that's definitely a problem. What I think would help with that, and I don't think they'll do it, but what I think would fix this problem is by, making... a bar that you have to reach to then play the killer. Let's say that I want to play Ghostface. I play Ghostface X number of matches, now I have to do something else, and then I can play Ghostface again. If they did that, it would force a scatter, it would force a stutter. Now, I think the problem with that is obviously some people don't like playing other characters, and if they can't play the character they want, what's the point? They're like, I paid for this game, I paid for this killer, why can't I play this killer? But at the same time, other people also paid for the game, they paid to enjoy the game, and it's not fun playing against the same thing over and over again, especially if the same thing is very, very strong, and there needs to be some kind of solution. DBD's current plan, I think, is the, separating the map thing.
So there's also something very, very cool, a quality of life feature that we're adding with this chapter. We will have a separate queue where you'll be able to go exclusively in this map.
And that's something that's going to be present for every upcoming map in the future also.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if it's the new killer on the new map, or if it's just to the new map. If it's just the map that gets a separate queue. I think it's probably better if it's just the map, because then there's a bit of variation. I can play Scratch Mirror Mikey on the new, was it Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria or whatever. And that would be kind of cool. That would be a kind of cool, fun thing to do. But yeah, I think having a bar to reach of some kind. It doesn't have to be what I just said, but what I just said would pretty much fix the problem. Oh, I've had, 5 matches as Ghostface. Now I have to play any other killer for a minimum of this many times. It could be just another 5 times on another killer if you play the same killer 5 times in a row. Just so that forcing people to stutter it a little bit. And that would allow for a slightly less hype. If he's strong, he's going to get picked. He's already going to get picked just because he's popular. So, yeah, putting a bar in the way, I think, would fix that a little bit. Something that's just global, everyone has to do it. The only problem is, I'm not sure how you would apply that same bar fairly to the Survivor side as well, but yeah.
It will be dead by Springtrap for a while after launch. However, that's not the only issue I see that will give Springtrap a bad reputation among Survivor players, and none of this is even mentioning the killer queues, which will be an eternity for, well, an eternity. And that's going to make some killer players hate them too. In a recent interview with Game Rant, killer designer Jason Guzzo, I think I'm pronouncing that right, I'm part Italian, that's how we would pronounce it, was asked about the kind of player he thought would enjoy Springtrap, and his answer was, "You're gonna hate my answer for this because it might sound generic, but I promise you it's not as generic as it seems. I think it'll appeal to most killer players because we found this space where different playstyles, projectile players, chase players, melee players, they can all find ways to make it work," and I'm assuming he means Springtrap's power. He goes on to say, "Like I said, my goal was to give as many tools as possible. It's the same philosophy we had with Dracula, where you could just play as the wolf the entire game if you wanted. Go nuts. It was the same idea here. I wanted as many types of players as possible to jump in and say, oh, this works for me. And you don't have to use everything at your disposal. If you like playing as a melee character, you don't have to use projectiles or focus on chases or loops. You can explore it however you like." Now you heard that right. He's going to have a multi-layered and multi-ability power, much like Dracula. He's being designed to appeal to the majority of killer players, which essentially is going to make him a jack-of-all-trades type killer, again, much like Dracula.
As long as he's jack-of-all-trades, master of none.
The issue is, and I struggle to even call this an issue because I truly don't believe it is, survivors in general tend to hate killers like this.
Well, before he continues on, yes, I think the reason survivors tend to hate killers like that is because... the main reason, if you just look at it objectively, is probably because it takes more effort to learn how to play against the killer. Because the killer has different skill sets, different tools, and you have to understand all the tools in order to, like, hey, we found a match, look at that. We'll come back to that. We've got to find some death, find some murder. Whoop. You did it. You did the Mori. You did the Mori. You did the Mori. Alright, I'll do the Mori. I'll do the Mori. Yeah, look at that. Look at that. I was making a point and then I forgot. Survivors hate killers like this. Oh! Okay, so he was talking about Swiss Army knife killers, essentially. Killers that can do a little bit of everything. And how survivors hate killers like that. And my point was, the reason on average, the survivors hate killers like that is because it takes more effort to learn how to play against them. You know, like you can't just get really good at dodging the fire from Dracula, but because then he'll just swap to a wolf, you know? So, yeah, I think that's the reason survivors don't really like... people sometimes don't really like playing against. Back to our video about Springtrap. Where were we? The Kaneki theory. He's got a Kaneki theory. I think I remember where we were at.
Behavior has been very conservative with his changes, and I believe this to be intentional. I'd even argue that given 50 hours or so of playtime with Kaneki, and a newer player would hold their own against even better players in pubs. Now, of course, I'm not talking like Champions of the Fog comp level survivors, but decent survivors all the same. My theory is that this is by design. My theory is that Behavior created and released Kaneki this way to see how far they could push the super casual and new player friendly balancing philosophy that they have admitted to applying to survivors, but for a killer, and essentially see what they could get away with. And I think that after all the changes they've given him, honestly, they've successfully done that. I believe Springtrap will be given the same treatment. What I'm saying is, we already know he's going to have a multi-ability and multi-layered power, and if you read the metaphorical room, you'll realize that this is the biggest and most hyped license Behavior has managed to get their hands on in quite some time, and it's going to attract a lot of new players. But the difference between new players coming in for FNAF versus new players coming in for another license is that FNAF players are coming to DBD to play Springtrap. They're not coming to DBD to play Survivor against Springtrap. They've done that already. They've spent the last 11 years since the first FNAF game playing Survivor against Springtrap or the animatronics in some form. They don't care about playing Survivor. This is the first time they've been able to be the animatronic outside of some random 8-bit adaptation. And because of that, whether the community likes it or not, this killer needs to be balanced around the majority of players, which, contrary to popular belief, isn't actually the pandering squad of content creators that is DBD Twitter. It's casual players. Springtrap has to be easy to play and effective without needing to spend thousands or even hundreds of hours to be able to compete with it in pubs. So I feel like because of that, it's possible that you're going to have a lot of unhappy Andys on DBD Twitter demanding nerfs to the killer because of their new player accessibility to strength ratio. When it comes down
I think
to
he's
it,
going to be right.
historically easy to play killers with a high level of strength often end up hated by a certain vocal subset of the community. You can see that in Chucky even today, and you can see that in Kaneki as well. And you can also observe behavior shift in balance philosophy with both of these killers because yes, while Chucky was nerfed, he was also then rebuffed to bring his casual player appeal back. And while Kaneki has seen a number of nerfs, he's still very powerful and very easy to play because of how conservative Behavior's been with their changes. I personally believe that Behavior is starting to see the value in strong killers that are easy to use, which I highly doubt is going to be applied to every future killer, but I think in Springtrap's case, for Springtrap in particular, it's necessary. And if this ends up being true, it's going to be like ripping off a band-aid for the community because Behavior is forcing them to adapt rather than just listening to constant cries to have everything gutted, which admittedly, I'll be honest, happens on both sides. Now listen, at the end of the day, the Five Nights at Freddy's chapter, however it goes, is going to be huge for Dead by Daylight. It's hype beyond anything the community has seen in the last 9 years.
I enjoyed that video from this YouTuber. And I agree with pretty much all the points he was making. Yeah, I think Springtrap is going to be overpowered. It's going to piss a lot of people off. I think that the casual players that are coming to play Springtrap and that want to play Springtrap are going to be... They're probably going to be aggressive, and they're probably not going to like, you know, losing. Not all of them, but there's, you know, going to be enough. It'll be a problem. And then the players that are already playing Survivor that like really enjoy, you know, all their texts and so on and so forth, they're also going to be pissed too. That's okay, because we get past it. We get over it eventually. I was one of the few people in my friend group that had nice things to say about Dracula. I liked Dracula. I thought he was cool. Everyone's complaining like, he's not a vampire enough. His abilities suck. He's too powerful. But he's Castlevania Dracula, you know? They did pretty well with him, honestly, all things considered. Would I have preferred, like, a blood-drinking mechanic for a vampire? Yeah, sure. But am I sad with what I got? No. He is atmospheric, and he's fun to play against. I guess, if I had any complaint, it's that the killers, that they've, removed some of the immersion from the way killers play. From what I used to see of DBD in the earliest of days, there were some really immersive killers to play against. Like, when Freddy was first added, he was not good, but he was immersive. It felt really immersive to play against him. And I think that maybe Springtrap on the Five Nights at Freddy's map might bring some of that immersion back, because they did say they're going to bring in a bunch of different new mechanics for him. So I'm excited to see what they do, honestly. I'm interested to see what they do.